We're good. And having said that, we will now move on to our introduction. So for the next few minutes, over please to Mike Shaughnessy.
Yes, thank you, Danny. Hello and welcome to everybody. I'm Mike Shaughnessy from Green Left. The idea for the Eco-Socialist Alliance emanated from a small group of eco-socialist activists in the UK. It was prompted by the COP26 climate conference that was being held in Glasgow in November last year. The idea was for eco-socialists to join together to amplify our voice in calling for eco-socialist solutions to our ecological and social ills. The organising groups have been Anti-Capitalist Resistance, Left Unity and Green Left, which, as Danny said, is the eco-socialist grouping in the Green Party of England and Wales. Planning meetings were held between the groups to coordinate our activities. The approach taken was non-sectarian, and I think this was the key to a harmonious collaboration. We had a common cause and we worked together towards it. We published public statements for the G7 conference, also held in the UK, and COP26. The COP26 statement was supported by 27 groups and over 60 individuals here in the UK and worldwide. We held an open Zoom meeting just before the G7 conference where people attended from the UK and from the US. We had a physical presence on COP26 coalition demonstrations in Glasgow and London and many other towns and cities in the UK. We had 2 banners made and 2,000 newspapers printed, which were distributed at the demo in London and at the Green Party's autumn conference. Unfortunately, heavy rain made it impossible to do so in Glasgow. All of these costs are split equally 3 ways between the organising groups. The alliance was so successful that we have decided to continue it and hopefully expand it. This is why we're here tonight, or today, depending on where you live. After me, Felicity will give a short talk on how climate change impacts on women, and then we'll have the open discussion where we would like to hear your ideas on how we might cooperate for COP27 in November this year in Egypt, and perhaps other issues too. We would like you to think of answers to these questions also. How can we operate on a local, national, and international level? What sort of structure is this organisation to have? Should we have more regular meetings? We've so far operated on the basis of a steering committee made up of representatives of the organising groups. New groups who join the alliance should have the same representation. But what about individual members too? We want to hear from the groups first, if any of them are here, that we'll, and then we'll open the discussion to individuals. We're proposing an email discussion list that people can join and a day school, which would be arranged in perhaps 2 or 3 months' time. There'll be a summary session at the end of the meeting, and if you want to keep in touch, please leave your name and email address in the comments. We hope you enjoy it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Now, just before we move on to the main part of the evening, which will be that roundtable discussion about the way forward for the Eco-Socialist Alliance, we are going to hear first of all from Felicity Dowling, and Felicity is going to speak about the impact that climate change has on women. So, Felicity, are you ready to address us? I see you there on screen.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this issue. I can't obviously speak in any depth in sort of 5 minutes. So I'm going to go over some key points and see, does that help clarify the fact that, you know, being eco-socialist, but also eco-feminist. So this grouping from the start has had an attitude of being eco-feminist, anti-racist, internationalist, and we recognise the complexities of humanity's needs. We can't possibly encompass them all, but we do recognise them. We acknowledge the particular burdens of the global south, and recognise the huge struggles that the Global South is leading on the issues of climate change. We're eco-socialist and eco-feminist in our resistance, in our agitation, and in our educational work. So the climate, environmental and health crises correspond and interact with economic and political crises and increasingly war around the world. We want the oil to stay in the ground and we want our homes to be warm. The world and its economy, its ecosystems, its oceans and freshwaters and its climate are ever more interrelated. And women make up half the world's population, yet hold less than a third of the wealth. And women's exposure to the multiple crises that are coming, the multiple events spurred by the different crises, we experience them through our biological sex and by gender roles, by the economic roles we play, by the lack of wealth and by the caring responsibilities and by the tradition of resistance that women have in such situations. So in our work as feminist, eco-socialists and internationalists, we link the paid work that women do and the unpaid work and the roles of women. Women in Britain, for instance, and I'll mention this a bit later, are a majority of trade union members. And we see patriarchy as part of the system that we've got to overthrow. And we see and proclaim the roles of women in producing new life, in bearing and nurturing children, and in caring for community members who need such care. And we equally recognise their role in building, defending and repairing communities. And I'm very much aware we've got women here who have such a history in links with the land and in holding traditional knowledge and in their core roles in resistance and in organising labour into trade unions and into community organisations. So as eco-socialists, we demand system change, and that system change has got to encompass women, children and the communities, or the attempt simply won't work. The new world we're trying to build is one where people and communities in their environments have precedence over profit. And those who stand in our way are the owners of huge wealth and the machine of the corporations. In organisation and in developing our understanding, we acknowledge the core role of women. If we work on any individual issue, transport, for example, the needs of women in transport must be considered and consulted and involved. So also must be disabled people. In issues of food, housing, the use of power, women, when I say power in that case, I'm not talking state power, I'm talking fuel and things like that. Women have got to be consulted, and war is a driver and a consequence of environmental and climate damage. And there's a huge tradition of women opposing war from the time of World War I through to Greenham and to the present day. And the arms industry, we recognise, has a huge impact on our climate. And that's a field where women, the campaigning against that's a field where women traditionally have been involved. But globally, young women and girls have been at the centre of the current wave of struggle. And we have a great history of women like the anti-fracking nanas. And hello, Tina, delighted to have you, Tina Rothery, here as one of the people who led the successful fight against fracking. We need to be aware of the different ways in which women differ from men in relating to and understanding the environment. Women hold up half the sky, as they say, but they hold far more of the NHS, the care sector, retail, garment making, food production, and increasingly in science. They play a huge role in global protests, climate crisis, and women and fighting poverty. The UN demands that women be involved in the work of climate resistance, of mitigation and transition and adaptation in these ways, that they're included and involved in the leadership. You have to imagine a situation where we know there's going to be a huge weather event, or we know there's going to be flooding. The women have to be involved in the discussion and planning as to how we will manage those things. That they have to be included in economic empowerment. Well, under capitalism, that's wishful thinking. We've got to get rid of the structures that keep women poor. in the protection of rights and well-being, then in times of extreme weather events, women are 14 times more likely to die. And that is a key reason why women have got to be involved in planning for extreme events. We know we've got to tackle climate crisis, the ecological crisis, with adaptation, mitigation, and so on. Fire, flood, desertification, heat, drought, and disease are just some of the problems we're facing. Food, water, care for the people, health, education, access to fuel and heating, access to arts and culture, to fun and useful work. So in our planning, we've got to be raising the issue and the needs of women. We have to listen to women. Cuba, incidentally, is a brilliant example of this, where they have local and national extreme weather planning committees that meet regularly, locally and at national level. And it's the reason they succeed is because they have that level of planning. It's something we should be adapting to. We've had austerity, the global south has had restructuring, and even now they have this terrible burden of unfair and unjust debt from the global north. And we have to be talking about how those attacks on women bore 80% of the damage of austerity in this country. And attacks on women, physical attacks on women in so many ways of aspects of our lives. Racism's grown, homophobia and transphobia has been weaponized, and there's been attacks on democracy and democratic rights aimed at, not just at women, but aimed at women, and governments have become more authoritarian. So we reckon 130,000 deaths in the UK directly attributable to austerity. So we recognise that women in many developing nations are a majority of the food producers, and that ties them absolutely into the climate and environmental crisis. And we recognise the huge power of organised labour. At the moment, I said earlier, more women than men are in trade unions, but the trade unions have a challenge both from their employers and from some of their erstwhile leaders who couldn't punch their way out of a paper bag. But women workers still have the additional burdens of work, childcare, housework, and shift work. Gone are the days when trade unionists when he or she knocked off from work, could devote hours to trade union organisation, to lay organisation. But it is the working class that's got the physical capacity to change this society. So we have to have an awareness of women in their role of trade unionists as well. So that's been a gallop through, a huge issue, but we do have to recognise the role that women play in their different and sectioned ways within the campaign. And I'm really pleased to see we've got a good representation of women here today. And let's build on that. And let's make sure where there are women's issues, big women's issues come up, that we're involved in it. We do something over International Women's Day. We do something when young women are on the streets on different issues, because that's where a lot of the resistance is. And we won't have difficulty in putting these ideas across once we get out there doing it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Felicity, and clearly a very important subject, and perhaps one that we could usefully devote rather more time to on a future occasion, perhaps treat it as a subject in its own right. Thank you very much indeed. Now, in a moment, we are going to open the general discussion. I'm going to share my screen again briefly. So whoever is not on mute, please can they put themselves on mute. We'll move to, and Pete, if you can identify them, you'll probably see a yellow band round the window, if you can mute them as host. In a moment we'll move to this open discussion, which is designed to cover the questions that Mike was raising a little bit earlier. Things like, how do we work together for COP27 this year? What sort of structure would be best for organising this alliance itself? And how ought we to operate locally? how ought we to operate nationally, and similarly, how could we operate internationally? So a number of topics. Now, we have a number of groups represented here. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, take one representative from each group, and that representative will have an opportunity of 2 or 3 minutes to outline their group's view on the way forward. And after that, I'd like to hear from those of you who are here in an individual capacity, that is to say, who are not here as members of a group. And before we start, I do need to say, please stick to the subject. This evening's discussion is about organisation and process. It is not about policy positions, so please, no big policy speeches, just short statements, please, about organisation and process that are to the point. We are short of time, and that is our purpose for this evening. So starting with the groups now, if you're a member of a group who would like to state the group's view on the way forward for the Alliance, if you'd like to contribute on behalf of your group, please raise your Zoom hand, and I'll try to keep track of them as they come in. But the first Zoom hand that I see is from John Devine. So John, over to you. 2 or 3 minutes, please, John.
Yes, I'll try and keep well within that if I can. I'm John Devine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Anti-Capitalist Resistance tonight. One of the key task, I see it at the moment, is that we need to actually engage in an education process with whoever we can reach out to broaden the base of the eco-socialist movement. And that really is what I would see as a task we have to face. Within that, the idea of an eco-socialism day school is to be welcomed. I also think we might want to have a series of public meetings, Zoom meetings, whatever, on aspects of eco-socialism. Felicity has mentioned the effects of the crisis, the ecological crisis on women. That would be one. But any area we think we can develop something on, we should have public meetings on. We grew out of COP26, and COP26 itself, the coalition is developing alternative ways of working. It's having a major review of what it's doing. We had a COP26 trade union caucus last week, or earlier this week, can't remember, where almost 100 trade unionists got together and decided to keep something together, to work together, to try and group workers within any union together so that they could work together. And that, I think, is something we would welcome, as is the ongoing work of COP26. Whatever it forms it out to, we need to be part of that discussion. We also need to look at reviewing the COP26 statement so that it is applicable within COP27 framework. And then moving on to the organizational questions, I think we really need to see this, the anti-sectarian way the organizations have worked together around a common topic, a common project, as what we have to continue. There will be disagreements, of course there will, but we've got to resolve them in that sort of a spirit. Got to be resolved by discussion, debate, sorting things out. And for that reason, I think the steering committee should now be an open meeting so that any member or anyone who supports a COP26 statement can come along and be part of making decisions. Within that, though, the organizations should have equal representation to each other. At the moment, there are 3 representatives from each organisation who meet as a steering committee. We need to open that up to other groups that want to come in and make it open to all individuals. We also need to start looking at how we develop our media profile. We had a very excellent broadsheet that went out around COP26. We need to start thinking how we develop that and where we go with all aspects of this, including the social media aspects. Now, I think I've summarized it very quickly, and I'm open to any questions, and I'm sure others will contribute. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, John. And I see our participation is now going up to 40, which means a number of people have joined us in the last few minutes. For their benefit, we are now in that part of the meeting where we are talking about the way forward for the Alliance. How do we organise ourselves? How do we structure ourselves? How do we work? How do we work together specifically for COP27? At this stage, we're inviting inputs from the groups represented here, and subsequently we shall invite contributions from individuals. I'm now going to go to Alan Todd and then Michael Pickin, but please, if you're here from a group, please do raise your Zoom hand and I will get to you. Pardon me. Alan Todd next, please.
Hiya. I just really want to pick up on the first part that John mentioned about how we reach out and extend the influence of the Eco-Socialist Alliance. And I think it's absolutely right that we obviously need to start to address our statement in terms of COP27.
I'm terribly sorry, Alan. Could you possibly say which group you're speaking on behalf of?
Oh, sorry,
please?
Left Unity. Yeah, COP27 coming up in November, but there are an awful lot of dates that are already beginning to appear on the calendar where I think we ought to have an Eco-Socialist Alliance presence. First of all, 18th, 19th of March, the Tories are having their spring conference in Blackpool. I will put all this in the chat so people don't need to take notes. 25th of March, a crucial one, I think, for us. Fridays for Future, there's going to be the first global climate strike, and we really need to have a presence there. 9th of April is the start of Extinction Rebellion's next rebellion in London at Hyde Park, and again, we ought to have some representation there. And then there is also, of course, the local elections coming up in May, and it would be good in some of the bigger centres anyway if we were able to have a visible presence or pressure, whatever it might be, around some of the main candidates. And with all of that coming up, one of the suggestions that I would make is that we need to go back and look at the idea of having another broadsheet like the one that we did pre-COP26, so that we've got one that's more up to date and deals with some of the more current issues. That's me done.
Thank you, Alan. And of course, we mustn't talk exclusively about calendar events in the UK, because this is open to comrades internationally. But whilst in the UK, I would also like to draw people's attention to the National Day of Action organised by SOS NHS, to retain a truly national health service in the UK, and that is on the 26th of February. So for our next group, I'm going to move to Michael Pickin, but just before that, I would urge anyone else who's here representing a group, please do raise your Zoom hand, because once we've exhausted, as it were, the groups, we can move on to individuals. So Michael and then Devin, please.
Thank you very much, and thanks for organising the meeting. I'm Michael Pickin, call me what you like. My mother calls me Michael. I represent Eco-Socialist.Scot, which is a newly formed group of Fourth International supporters in Scotland. We have a website, Eco-Socialist.Scot. But we're a small propaganda group publishing eco-socialist related stuff. And political dynamics of the Scottish situation means we work in other formations and collaborate, particularly with lots of other groups on the left. Therefore, it's important to bring out the fact that some of these groups may autonomously want to be involved in the Eco-Socialist Alliance. One group in particular that's represented here this evening is the Republican Socialist Platform, which was established to regenerate the Radical Independence campaign from 2014. And we have other comrades and members of the Republican Socialist Platform in the room. But what I wanted to highlight was the fact that Scottish politics has a very different dynamic to the rest of the United Kingdom, or certainly to England. We have a situation in which we have an SNP government with a participation of the Scottish Green Party, and the Scottish Green Party at its conference in November defined itself as an eco-socialist movement. The Scottish National Party, it's not a party I agree with, but it does define itself as a left-wing social democratic party, and within its ranks there are significant numbers of socialists. And for example, the Republican Socialist Platform works closely with a group called the SNP Socialists, which also would define itself, I think, very much as being within this. So you have two governing parties in which there are eco-socialists holding significant positions and influence. The COP26 itself, happening in Glasgow, had an enormous radicalising effect on the situation in Scotland. Over 100,000 people, not all of whom were attending the COP, I can assure you. In fact, the vast majority were not attending the COP. They were people mainly from Scotland who demonstrated. And we have had demonstrations of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of Scotland around political demands that fit in with eco-socialist aims. So what I wanted to make the point is that it's all very well and good to talk about the UK or coming from the UK, but certainly there's a huge difference between the dynamics and the different organisations and the different polities, as the political scientists call them, within the United Kingdom. I don't know whether there's anyone to speak about Wales, but that also has a separate dynamic to that of England and should be brought out. But it therefore makes it important that particularly, and the one criticism that members of the Republican Socialist Platform had about the Eco-Socialist Alliance platform was that it didn't mention the role of stateless nations, which is not just about the question of Scotland and Wales within the and Ireland within the United Kingdom context, but is also about things like the Kurdish movement and struggle, where some of the most radical eco-socialist ideas are being tested out. So we do think it is important that eco-socialists support movements for liberation and for self-organization, and where those take on a national character, not a reactionary national character, of course, but a progressive national character, then that needs to be recognised, and the organisation forms that we have need to recognise that.
Thank you, Michael. Now, I had said we would come to Devon next, but I've had a request in the chat. We have a comrade with us today from South Korea, for whom clearly it is in the middle of the night, and in the interests of, on humanitarian grounds perhaps, in order that the comrade can get some sleep, I've been requested to go next to, and please forgive me if I mispronounce this, but because I can only pronounce it in the way that I know, looking at the sequence of characters. I think the name looks like Soren. If Devon, would you be happy to give way to Soren? Thank you very much for the thumbs up, Devon. Michael, you still have your hand up. I think that might be a legacy hand. So can we now please go to Soren and take a brief contribution from Soren? Soren, the floor is yours.
Okay. Me.
That is correct. Yeah.
Yes, I'm from. So I, I'm not really good at speak English. So if you just understand, please, my understand. And
it's all right. A lot of these people can't understand me either.
Okay. So I just introduce myself. It's okay. Okay. I'm Sarin from South Korea. Last year in Glasgow, I attended COP26. I first time meet and keep in touch with the Eco-Socialist Alliance. So I am in a socialist party in Korea. So I'm first time new and thinking about eco-socialism in here. So we start to like climate justice movement is start now in Korea. And many like government and many like president this year, we select new person this year. So they are all talk about climate change, climate crisis, but they are all talk about green capitalism and like that kind of things are happening in Korea. So our left party and left groups are start movement about and talking about eco-socialism and starting like reading books with the young ladies, young girls with my friends, and they are starting to new about thinking about eco-socialism in here. So I want to like hear more about another Eco-Socialism Alliance go talk and listen. Yes, that is my purpose in here. Yes.
Thank you very much indeed, Soren, and we are very welcome indeed. And that was perfectly clear. I think admirable command of English. Thank you very much indeed. So returning to our groups, next I can see Devon and then D. Searle. Let's go first to Devon, please.
Hi, first of all, thanks for the invite. My name is Devon. I'm here from a group called Rise, which is a network within People Before Profit in Ireland. So we have, I'm not going to say too much here. This is my first meeting, I suppose, with the groups. It's just great to be here and hear what everyone's saying. Obviously, it'd be great to get, I suppose, pool the resources of everybody that's trying to do similar things all around the world together and create some sort of a international platform, which is obviously the reason, at least, that I'm here or that we're here today. And just in terms of, I guess, I see somebody might put it into the chat there. We have, I guess, the equivalent of an MP in Rise in our network, and then in the wider network, we have, I think, 4 total MPs in Ireland. So that's us. Thank you.
Thank you, Devon. So I've got a few more hands going up now. We'll go now to Dee, and then to Oliver, and then to Stephen. So Dee first, please.
Hello, and thanks very much for organising this. It's really great to see so many comrades here. I've got 2 hats on, in fact 3. I'm a member of Camden Green Party, and also here with another comrade, Lucy. We're among the founders of a group called Climate Emergency Camden, which is a cross-party group. It's a Labour Party and Green Party, and also lots of other local groups such as Friends of the Earth and others. We probably haven't quite come out as being eco-socialist, but that is pretty much what we're there for, because we're challenging our Labour Council to live up to its promises on climate emergency, and working together has been, I think, really, really useful, because it's really helped us to understand the pressures that other people come from, and particularly comrades that are in the Labour Party, because that they often some Labour Party friends here have faced criticism or questioning, stern questioning from the Labour Party to say, why are you in this group at all that includes non-Labour Party people? So, and also understanding each other of what we're trying to achieve. And we are making progress, and we've drawn up, we're looking at what we do around the local elections, because that's a time when, and certainly in London and many other parts of the country, in May we'll be having local elections. I know that's bringing it down quite locally, although I will say on an international point is that Camden covers 2 two constituencies, and comrades in the West, which is Hampstead and Kilburn, have recently established the position of a climate emergency officer and are working with their constituency Labour Party to do more on climate emergency. So what we've done is we've drawn up a list, or in the process of drawing up a list of 10 demands that we'll be putting to all candidates standing in the local elections, asking them to publicly commit to do much more locally to fight climate and ecological emergency. But we are also in the process of setting up something called One Vote for the Planet. And in wards where the candidates won't sign up to our 10-point pledge, we will stand one candidate on the basis that you can still, if you're a committed Labour Party person, you can give 2 of your votes to the Labour Party, but you can give 1 for the planet. And there are some parts of our borough where there are Tory wards where we just might even pick up some people who would never vote for another party, but they might just vote for a candidate that is standing there purely on the for the environment. And so it's a very tactical way of organising, but we can offer it there as something that people could maybe consider on ways of working locally to prioritise issues around climate and ecological emergency.
Thank you, Dee. And next we're going to move to Oliver Charleston, and following that to Stephen Hall. And please, if you're from another group, do get in the queue by raising your Zoom hand. Oliver, perhaps if you could begin by saying which group you represent.
Okay, so just want to say good evening, comrades. Great to see everybody. I'm here for supporting Left Unity. Good to see Felicity also of Left Unity and a number of, I think, other comrades from Left Unity here. So so we're a radical left party that's been sort of around since 2013. We've I think pretty much in the last few years moved decisively towards an eco-socialist position. We bring to the table our own sort of, I guess, internationalist sort of viewpoint. I mean, we're a member of part of European left, so we have within that parties like the German Die Linke and the French Communist Party and Sinn Féin and other sort of global, well, sort of European leftist and progressive parties. And I suppose basically that what I just obviously wanted just to let the comrades here know that Left Unity is here as one of the groups, and we're keen to contribute, I guess, our sort of socialist and internationalist perspective, and yeah, really, and just and also more to the point. I mean, here in the UK, we've actually also done our own sort of alliance building for sort of elections as well. So we've recently formed the sort of an alliance with 3 other parties, so that there's not sort of a clash, as it were, between the different candidates. But this is something, certainly the Eco-Socialist Alliance is something we're very keen to explore, and yeah, if we can kind of contribute to that in any way that we can, then we certainly will, and we're keen to be part of the conversation of this. So I just wanted to put that out there for Left Unity this evening, comrades. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Oliver. And next we shall go to Stephen and then Roy. Oliver, you might want to pop your hand down because that helps manage the queue, as it were, on my screen. Thank you. So Stephen, next. Stephen, if you could begin by stating the organisation you represent, please.
Well, I'm the I'm current president of Greater Manchester Association of Trade Union Councils, but I'm retiring in February. But I have agreed to take on the job of Environment and Sustainability Officer, which I'm also that officer at Bolton Trades Council. So I'm coming from a trade union background and a geographic, Greater Manchester, Bolton, Wigan type body of people who are very sympathetic to socialist, eco-socialist perspective type of idea. A lot of that tied up with our local Diggers Festival and Gerard Winstanley. I applaud those of you taking this initiative. I would have been a bit more probably involved in helping out had I not had a horrendous 2 years of ill health, open to do a bit more in future. But we've asked some important questions at the beginning. I think it was Danny who asked some a few questions about how we're going to organise, and I think we're doing all right as it is generally. And the main thing should be a thrust towards working together, people with a similar view to the stuff that's in the statement that we put out for COP26, and try to generate a movement, a broader movement, and a discussion. Now, because we're involved in trades council movements in Greater Manchester, we look at it a bit differently from, say, some of the political groups that are involved in this. I've nothing against. I'm just saying, we're, for example, for events in Bolton and Greater Manchester in the past, we helped organise two of the biggest ever anti-fracking demonstrations with Tina and others during the Barton Moss campaign in Preston New Road. So we've been organising big events, and we should be really looking as being part of a movement going forward that's organising events along with all the other groups like XR, Green Party, local Green Party. In Bolton we have a local diggers group, and doing stuff of educational nature that helps promote a wider and bigger movement than simply a few people who sat down and thought this is something we should be doing, and thought that way for the last 40 years, which probably some of us here have. We need engage with people, so we need some town by town big events that we can help to contribute to put together. And we need to be organising meetings and propaganda around those events that's promoting, the idea of social overturn of what is a system change that involves a sustainable future and egalitarianism, and promoting that as a broader idea, because if it doesn't catch on now, I don't know whenever it's going to catch on. I think mood is changing. Sadly, there's still not enough people involved on a mass level, in my view. I mean, I look at town where I live, and they're lucky there's more than about, 40, 50 people who even take this seriously. So we need to, transform that movement if we're going to make change. And we need to be promoting, in my view, a discussion because of being a diverse component on how we go forward as a broader movement. And that's what I'd be into anyway, if I'm going to be involved. And that's the type of, I suppose, general consensus of a view of people I know across Greater Manchester Trades Council movements that left of the trade unions.
Thank you, Stephen. And after Stephen now, we'll go to Roy. Roy, a few minutes from you, please.
Yeah, of course. Roy Sanderson, Green Left Vice Chair. I think it is echoing up what stuff Stephen just said. Actually, it is about building a movement. It is about building a mass movement. Actually, deals with the issue of climate disaster, basically, but also uniting that with the need to have a change in society that suits working class people. We've got to be quite revolutionary, actually, in our approach. And I think it is about building links across various parties and groups and stuff on a united position to do that. Green Left itself was actually formed in 2006, by the way. So we've been at it quite a long time as eco-socialists. and we obviously always engage people on the left as well in general. In terms of the way forward, I would be concerned about it's being sidetracked down the road of bourgeois elections. For those who don't live in the UK or England, particularly, we don't have PR. So when parties stand, they will end up getting very small votes in the main. That's what's happened actually. So unless there is a movement actually within the Labour Party and the trade unions for getting PR, Unite, for example, with very big trade unions declared for PR recently. So it is, the problem is, comrades, if we look at elections, bourgeois elections as a way forward without any democratic instigation in terms of PR, then you're just pissing the wind, to be honest, because you're never going to get the votes you need to make any real impact. What we also need to be aware is if members are members of parties like the Green Party or Labour Party or SNP or whatever, if you decide that they can't be part of this movement in terms of elections because their national leadership doesn't support the position you want them to support, then what it means, you can end up standing against eco-socialists who are members of those parties. So you've got to look at being more sophisticated in the approach that you take. This movement we're developing in this country, but across the globe, and there's other people doing stuff as well in different areas, is about maximising unity in action and struggle, and working together in a non-sectarian way, and using our strengths and fighting those that we need to fight.
Thank you, Roy. Now, in a moment, we're going to open this up to individuals. And in just a moment, I'm going to go to Julia Steinberger. But before that, we've had some input from a comrade in Iran. And understandably, that comrade is unable to be with us today. So what I agreed to do was to read out the suggestions from the comrade, and it's perhaps unsurprising that a lot of the contributions are beginning to focus in on very similar suggestions. So our friend in Iran suggests that we set up an international eco-socialist school, that we establish a regular international eco-socialist publication, that we could write basic eco-socialist books and pamphlets, and then that we connect with environmental activists from Extinction Rebellion. Similarly, that we might connect with ecocide activists, then that we build a financial fund, that we hold eco-socialist seminars and conferences, and their final point was to say, through building bridges with Extinction Rebellion and the ecocide activists, we can begin to nudge them in the direction of eco-socialism. So that's an individual in Iran who's written ahead with their comments, and we promise to share them in this way with participants at this meeting. What I want to do now is invite Julia Steinberger and then other individuals. We're simply going to Julia first because Julia, I understand, has had the misfortune to contract coronavirus and perhaps is not feeling able to last the duration of a full 90-minute meeting. So with your indulgence, we'll go to Julia first and then to other individuals. Julia, please.
Hi, that's her. I can't even speak anymore. It's very kind of you. I see that Alan and Bob have hands up. But okay.
Yeah, no, I think they're in the queue after you, Julia. So
okay,
you're
well, that's very kind. I'm not sure I can be very coherent, partly because there are a lot of things going on, including here in Switzerland, where I'm based right now. I'm also an IPCC author, and one of the things you might want to be paying attention to is the fact that the sixth assessment report is coming out. So it's I think the fifth assessment report, if I'm not mistaken, came out something like 2014. So we're talking a long time lapse. The working group 1 report came out in August last year. It sort of shook up the world. And the second one on impacts will come out normally February 28th. And the one on third one, which I'm involved in, on mitigation, will come out on April 4th. And having seen them, I can't get into detail in the content, but I'm just going to say that they are going to shake things up quite a bit. So I would just try to be ready for that and think about it and how you're planning things, and try to give some time to those reports in terms of digesting their content, and also in terms of using them as opportunities to try to bring the topic further into the attention of whoever you're trying to communicate to. I agree that there would be a benefit to having eco-socialist ideas connected to the rest of the movement. So any way that that can happen, I think, is useful. And I think that one has to be very, I think things are going to speed up very fast in directions we want and don't want and are completely unprepared for. And so that we have to be willing to be very quick on our feet in terms of just getting stuff out there and not necessarily having huge process burdens. So those are sort of what I would enjoin people to try to think about. So thanks for doing all this work. And it's really nice to be at this meeting despite the state of my brain.
Thank you very much, Julia. Perhaps we could just ask you once again, were you able to give a date for the publication of the 6th assessment report?
Yeah, so the dates are actually, I'll try to find the link to the IPCC website. Everything's been delayed and messed around by COVID. You have no idea. Well, maybe you do. So it's February 28th for the 2nd working group and April 4th for the 3rd working group. So there's sort of a month gap between the two, which I think is good because I think both of them are going to be quite a shock to the system. I think it would be bad if they were too close together, probably.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Julia.
Oh, and the other thing I should say is that if people have some kind of an expert status, if you have some kind of an academic background, have published something or other on this topic, you can sign up to be a reviewer for the synthesis report. And I think that would be quite important. The synthesis report is going to come out in September, and that's sort of the whole thing. And I think that that's quite important to bring together a lot of messages. Like there are a lot of things, if we bring them together to make them stronger, can bolster sort of a more integrated response or coherent response, and that would be great. So I'll leave the links to both of those things.
Thank you very much indeed. So other individuals queuing up now, or perhaps still representing groups, we have Alan Armstrong, Bob Whitehead and Jonathan Neal so far in that order. Say around 3 minutes each, please. Comrades, beginning with Alan, over to you.
Thanks very much, Danny. Earlier on, you heard Mike Pickens speaking from Scotland, in perhaps more with the capacity as Scottish Eco-Socialists and Socialist Resistance, although he did mention the organisation that he and I am a member of, which is the Republican Socialist Platform. A weekend ago, we had Rob Marsden, who's here tonight, addressing a national forum, and it was a really good contribution. We came to certainly looking at the Eco-Socialism Not Extinction platform. Most of us found there was nothing in it we could disagree with as such. There may be things we would have liked to add, but then I'm sure that's true of other people here, and that's not for tonight anyhow. But there was one area that we did think was important, and Mike's already raised that, and that is, despite the excellent statement where you say only the organised working class, the rural oppressed, and First Nations of the Global South, right, particularly picking up on the First Nations, we think that was really good. At the COP26, we were given a particular status, like organising marches, organising some of the sessions, and our emphasis was very much on First Nations, but also something that's not in this statement, stateless nations. Of course, living in Scotland, I'm one of those stateless nations, but as Mike pointed out, there are many others. who are very much on the front line of various struggles, Catalonia, the Basque Country, Kurdistan. And so, we would very much like to see, in addition, down in the chat, I suggest an amendment. I don't know how that can be put. So what it would read in that particular section is only the organised working class and the rule of press in existing states and stateless nations. So it's that in existing states and stateless nations would be put in there. I think that's important because perhaps quite a few, there are organisations here which represent people right across Great Britain, that's fine, but there are also organisations like the founding one, I think you're from, Danny, and the Green Left doesn't exist in Scotland. The Green Party is a separate organisation in Scotland. Left Unity Party does not exist in Scotland. So the vast majority of people in Scotland are organised in support of Scottish independence, even if they are in all Britain organisations like Social Resistance, or for instance, the SWP, the Socialist Party, all that. So we would like that recognition in. Whether it has to be sent around other groups again for the future, I don't know. But just asking people to consider that particular amendment. I'm hoping it wouldn't be that controversial, because we would far rather work jointly with you rather than in parallel with you, because there's so much we agree with. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Alan. And we're still gathering views from individuals. I don't think we're going to make big decisions tonight, and we'll see what Rob suggests when he sums up. But we're looking principally at gathering views in order that the steering committee then can reflect subsequently on the input from members. So we're going to go now to Bob, and then to Jonathan, and then to Tina. Bob, up to 3 minutes from you, please.
Yeah, I'm from Left Unity in Birmingham, and we started getting involved in quite a lot of environmental work in the last year or two. But there have been groups nationally and internationally, of course, that have been involved in this for many, many years, if not decades. I mean, Friends of the Earth in England, for example, is 50 years old. Greenpeace, Green Party, all credit due. But it's been the last few years when we've had some international movements, Extinction Rebellion, You Strike for the Climate, and the COP26 mobilisation in particular spring to mind, that really raised the climate agenda up the general political agenda. These have been very successful political movements, and it means that we have a wider periphery in which to operate. And I don't know about all of these, but I think XR is a bit of flux. It's opening up to more politics. It's radicalising, and I think was certainly reflected amongst the COP26 people as well, and you see that within the youth strikers as well, which is international. So we have this wider milieu in which to operate in. So I think we have to create a pole of attraction for the eco-socialist movement within that wider periphery. One that's accessible, one that's open, one that's non-sectarian, and which does not seek to dominate or hijack or be seen to be trying to take over the environmental movement in any shape or form. It's a part of the movement, but it's a pole of attraction which can address and dialogue with the people who are radicalizing within these new movements. And in that respect, we need local, national, and international meetings and publications. And the comrade from Iran stole a lot of my thunder on that one. I agree with all the points that was made there. And so we need to get ourselves out there in terms of, as I say, local, national, and international meetings, and make a presence and create a pole of attraction which is non-sectarian, inclusive, accessible within the wider, new, growing movement.
Thank you very much indeed, Bob. Much appreciated. And I see some thumbs up there. Next we shall move to Jonathan, whom perhaps many of us have heard before in various forums. A few minutes from you, Jonathan, and then we shall go to Tina. So Jonathan first, please.
I'll try to be very quick. Last week I went to something called the 5th Eco-Socialist Encounters in Lisbon in Portugal, which was a continuation of the Eco-Socialist Encounters that were organized by the 4th International and their friends over quite a few years. It was a stunningly good event. It was organized by Climaximo, the main climate organization in Portugal. There were 120 people from about 15 countries. It would have been much bigger without COVID, but the spirit was very good, and the people at it were overwhelmingly young. And they're going to they're passing the baton on to somebody else to organize the next Eco-Socialist Encounters next year. And I think everybody here would like to be a part of that if the pandemic allows us by then. They also decided to have an international eco-socialist journal called the Eco-Socialist, and for the moment, I'm on the editorial board. Also, we had a long 3-day meeting about climate jobs as well, of different climate jobs campaigns in different countries. And the key thing that comes out of that I'd like people to think about being involved in is we're going to do the first weekend in June the 3rd to 5th. We're going to do an international conference about climate crisis and climate jobs online. And it's online so that we can have there's not going to be translation. And what we want is many, many different workshops mainly by grassroots organizations, local branches, local organizations, and so on. We're also open to political organizations doing workshops. And we're hoping for 50, but we might get 100, or we might get even more workshops running in parallel to popularize the idea of climate jobs, but also to bring together grassroots groups, particularly from the Global South. If you want any more chat about any of these, what I'm doing is putting my email in the chat, and just send me an email. We can chat about it.
Thank you. Jonathan. Jonathan, I wonder, the Eco-Socialist Journal that you referred to, is that an online publication, and could you perhaps include a URL for that in the chat that people could follow?
We haven't got a URL yet because we elected the first editorial board 3 days ago.
Okay.
And
right.
The organizers are absolutely exhausted by what they did already for last week. So we haven't, but we will. And I'll circulate it to everybody when we can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So now we'll move on to Tina. Tina, a few minutes from you, please.
Hi there. So I'm kind of speaking from the perspective of the nanas. You know, we fought fracking, and so we're very much the eco side of things. But it was listening to Dee Searle earlier. She was talking about how
I'm sorry, Tina. Since we have comrades from North America and South Korea and the Philippines and elsewhere, perhaps just 1 minute on who the nanas are?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. We were a bunch of women that got together and occupied a field where a fracking company was going to come and extract shale gas, and rallied some attention around that, and then didn't stop for like since 2014, really. And then it was quite a successful operation. We certainly managed to stop fracking in the UK for now. And I was really proud to be a part of that. That was an amazing thing. What was most amazing and what was relevant to this and why I'm speaking is that I was listening to Dee Searle and then Stephen Hall, and they were talking about how like you rally around and we get together around that one issue. Like for Dee, it was the climate emergency. Stephen Hall for us was an amazing conduit for the anti-fracking movement. You know, I mean, for us, we were just individual people who wanted to fight something. We didn't know how to access unions, access political parties, and get people to stand together when you didn't agree on all things in life, but you needed to on this one. And I think that's the important thing also, that then the last speaker, I think it was Bob Whitehead, you were talking about it not being under anyone's one banner. You know, and this eco-socialist thing is great. But I can see like where we had rifts in our movement, the anti-fracking movement, was that, you know, we did 1,000 days at one roadside in protest. And the only times we had problems were elections. You know, an election would come up, the reds and greens amongst us would be split. And then you'd have all this rift to try and heal and get yourself back into that same shared goal. So all I was going to suggest that I thought might be what we learned was that the more stuff you do together, you know, and you focus on that one thing, it doesn't really matter what that one thing is. It's the act of doing it together that will bond and unite us, and mean we'll be less argumentative about what are those 10 demands or whatever, because it's going to be impossible to get everyone to agree everything, and everyone has their own side of the picture. But I wonder if there's a side that's not eco, not socialist, not red, not green, where we start there and we emanate out rather than bringing in too much of what we ordinarily fight for. Sorry, I don't suppose that was overly useful. But anyway, it was just to say that I thought the speakers talking about that unified action, say on a climate emergency or on COP26, that's where the focus works best. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And now we go to Tim. Tim, up to 3 minutes, please, Tim. Sorry, Tim, you're on mute.
Thank you. I just want to suggest that of the 40 participants, are there any others who contribute to council committees by attending the public forum? You don't have to attend the whole committee. You have 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning of the agenda, and you can have your say on whatever you want to try and get across our eco-socialist message and the demands that we want to see them act in future. So please get active in your local councils on the committees where they do have a public forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Now I notice also that we have a contribution in the chat from Bailey, whose microphone will not work, but Bailey says, might I suggest that as well as linking up with eco-socialist movements, we use the other side of the coin and link up with other socialist movements. One example in the UK is Socialist Appeal. They were present at COP26 and have lots of members that are focused on the capitalist climate collapse. So I'm simply reading that out because Bailey was unable to use a microphone. I now have a hand from Romain. We'll go to Romain in just one moment. I should say perhaps 1-2 more contributions and then we'll probably move to Rob to start winding up. But for the moment, let's hear from Romain.
Hi, I'm unmuted there. Yeah, just to say hi to everybody, new people. It's lovely that you've got the reach, global reach, and we've got people from other countries. So welcome to all of you. I'm here hauling myself out through my 4th bout of COVID, Omicron probably this time. My first bout was not hospitalized, but the long-term symptoms knocked me out, gave me 2 serious long-term health issues, but the foggy brain just beginning to lift. So I'm just beginning to get some kind of organizing and energy left back now to do some reading and thinking. And so it's great to be with you. I would just like to say I fully support the idea of a day school. I think it's great to have plenty of time where you can focus and discuss various themes. I would suggest that we've got plenty of contacts with Campaign Against Climate Change and their trade union group. We've got contacts and experts through the new Lucas plan, where we've been developing ideas around just transition, and the Lucas plan was about saving jobs and building futures with expert workers from the shop floor, deciding how to use their skills to save their jobs, and then making a political decision that they wanted to replace their previously mostly military work with socially useful production. So these are great ideas that we can bring in, which I think can excite people and give them confidence to think that, yes, we are the workers. We're the ones on the factory floors, in the hospitals, in the schools. We're the ones who have great knowledge and experience in what we do. And we should be and can be the ones suggesting better ways of doing things for the future. There's also, I don't know if anyone knows about the new Putney debates. One of the groups still working and meeting together from London Occupy have been meeting regularly and putting together a timeline of rebellion. Again, to me, along with Just Transition, the idea of the history of rebellion and the struggles and successes that we have had that seem to be sort of lost to us as history, again, could excite us to look at more recent successes, current strike actions going on. There's some good examples there. Of course, Tina and the fracking campaign was another fairly recent example as well. However much time that took, you know, the dedication of our activists is fantastic. So we've got a lot of people we could draw on for helping putting discussions together, day schools, political education. If it works as a plan, use it as a template. We could repeat it again in different cities, and maybe people in other countries could use the template of the day with the various different discussion groups. If we wanted to do it regionally, we couldn't do a full day, maybe do half days, with getting at least a couple of good discussions on, you know, a couple of different aspects of eco-socialism to bring people in. Activism, use of the website. I think we need a variety of approaches. We need to have a diary of things that are going on. We need to have some good articles. We need to link articles that have been written, struggles around the world, successes people have had, how they went about it, practical things, and maybe some humour. I think, yes, we need a presence at events. The banners are absolutely fabulous, and I didn't design them. So that's amazing. Whoever did that, fantastic for those big banners. A broadsheet, brilliant. If we've got the time to produce a broadsheet, maybe a couple of times a year, maybe 3 times a year, maybe if you've got a great template that people agree on, you know, you can drop things in, and then just before you go to print, put something in that's really up to the minute with the latest evidence and facts would be great. The Green Left, we did produce a newspaper called the Eco-Socialist. I was one of the joint editors of that. We only produced a couple of copies there due to various logistical problems. But if we can't do that for every single thing we turn up to, if we can have a smaller 2-size A5 maybe leaflet that could be slightly adapted, a template form, to go to various different events to back things up, just to say hello to people, to show them we're supporting their event as well, and to give lots of information about how they can find out more, invite them to the website, how to join up and support us, would be really, really good. I think, oh yeah, personally, I've been thinking, well, while my fog was still there and while it started lifting, you know, I'm not in any political party anymore. And I'm thinking of perhaps putting together a zine or an e-zine. So it would be like a sort of, you know, magazine. It could be a little bit anarchic. It could be a little bit wild. It could have a mix of serious articles, fun, cartoons, historical links, artwork and things like that. So that's my feeling personally. I'm also quite good at organising meetings or sharing things if anybody needs anybody to do that. Or I can train people up, because I think that's the way to go as well, to help other people support the movement. Yes, so historical struggles, currently where we are, future of what we want. It doesn't have to sound like utopian stuff. It can be historical, it can be scientific and social, and we can bring those threads together. And I think we need a variety of approaches to make that attractive. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Romaine. Lots and lots of good practical suggestions there. I'm going to take one last contribution before we move to Rob Marsden for the summary of this evening. Or I shouldn't say this evening, because it's not evening for everyone. The summary of this meeting. So a couple of minutes, please, from David Schwartz, and then we'll go to Rob. David, please.
Oh, thank you. I'll be very brief. I live in DC. I'm a member of the Green Party of the United States, the International Committee, and I'm an activist in the local affiliate, the DC State Green Party. But I didn't represent myself, representing these organizations, but I just want to emphasize that the Green Party of the United States, of course, is explicitly eco-socialist. It's moving to a strong eco-socialist position. Howie Hawkins actually initiated the global Green New Deal from an eco-socialist perspective back in 2010. So I would just look forward to cooperating with the Eco-Socialist Alliance, and thank you for that minute.
And thank you, David, and indeed to everyone who's joined us from outside of the UK, because clearly the international dimension of this is going to be key. As we all know, the climate knows no national boundaries, and if this problem is going to be solved, it has to be solved globally. So I think that's a good place to end the open discussion. And as promised in our agenda, what we're going to do now for the closing minutes is hand over to Rob Marsden, who has the unenviable task of bringing all that discussion together. So over to you, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's been a great meeting and loads of really good ideas. I had my camera turned off throughout the meeting because I've got a really dodgy internet connection at the moment, but I was nodding along to everything that people were saying and giving thumbs up, you know, to all these great ideas. And I'll try to synthesize those in what I'm saying. But I want to start with a political point, which is when we put out our statement, we use the slogan, eco-socialism, not extinction. And we use that quite deliberately as what we thought was an advance on system change, not climate change, which is a great slogan in itself. But we thought, you know, what system needs to change and how does it need to change? What do we need to do? And also what is at stake? And I think that's what we encapsulated with eco-socialism, naming the change we need, not extinction, naming what's at stake. And, you know, that slogan itself is a nod towards Rosa Luxemburg's, you know, socialism and barbarism. And using the word extinction is a nod towards the amazing work that XR has done, simply in terms of putting forward the urgency of the problem and the idea that we face multiple and interconnected crises, you know, all of which amount to extinction in whichever way you look at it. So that's what's at stake. And what we need to do as eco-socialists is try to find, you know, come together and try to up our game to actually meet this sort of challenge. And I think the fantastic ideas that come up tonight really boil down to how do we build non-sectarian mass movements around eco-socialist ideas. We're all pretty much on the same page here, but, you know, how do we come together to do that? We have a task essentially of propagandizing within the existing movements. That's the pool in which we are swimming. And, you know, Bob Whitehead, you know, outlined that and the groups that we work with, interact with and learn from, as well as try to influence. And how do we build links as activists ourselves across very many different groups, which are fragmented within different groups, different parties, often with overarching party structures, which may, you know, mean we have to cut across those, you know, to come together. How do we build those links on the ground? And, you know, not just across borders, which we need to do, but, you know, within our own countries, we face some of those obstacles. And I think we've made a minor start, you know, with the Eco-Socialist Alliance in terms of what we managed to do on the ground for the demonstrations around November the 7th. And Romain mentioned the Eco-Socialist newspaper from several years ago, which I was involved with as well. And I wasn't in Green Left at the time. I think I was in, it might have been pre-Left Unity, but, you know, I was in Socialist Resistance at the time. And it was an attempt to bring together self-defined eco-socialists. And it was, you know, minor success, but in terms of the forces around it, it's nothing compared to what we actually have here on this Zoom. So, you know, that's a good sign. As I said, you know, we're fragmented and we do face the obstacle of being in different organizations. Tina said, you know, correctly, you know, the more stuff you do together, that's the basis, isn't it? That's doing stuff together means that you can actually come to if not an agreement on everything, at least an understanding of other people's positions and a sensitivity towards how you deal with some of those differences. And I think that's fantastically important. And I'd like personally to see Eco-Socialist Alliance as something of sort of like a permissive brand, in that if you have activists in a particular town or city or all roughly around the Eco-Socialist Alliance, why not put out a common leaflet for an action in that town rather than duplicating amongst organizations? You can have Eco-Socialist Alliance in the masthead, you can have your own logo and your contact details at the bottom. If there's a number of groups, that's absolutely fine. We'd be permissive on that. But where we can agree on stuff, let's not put out 2 leaflets and agree with each other. Let's put out 1 leaflet with 2 sets of names on, or 3 or 4. Let's do that where we can, and let's amplify our message in that way. Because being seen to be non-sectarian publicly and visibly is a good way, good way forward. And I think in that spirit, what Dee said about the 10 demands around elections, it could be quite important for us as well, because we're never going to agree to stand individual eco-socialist candidates if we're all in different organisations. But what we can do is agree to host hustings, maybe online, for candidates in elections. We can agree to circulate, things for across different parties for people to sign up to. We can publicise the fact that the Tory candidates have all said no, and other candidates have said yes to 80% or 90% of what we're saying. We can say that. We can say that whatever party we're in, and we can publicise that. And I think that's again a good way of putting out our basic eco-socialist positions or demands, and we can do that. That's particularly pertinent to sort of England and Wales, I think, where we don't have PR, but could be a model elsewhere. To get down to the bit I was actually supposed to do, which is summing up, some of the proposals that we had coming from the steering committee, which has been very much an ad hoc body. We simply thought one thing we need to do, and this meeting is part of it, is keep the show on the road, and let's see where it goes. So with that in mind, we're going to propose that we will set up a discussion group, an email discussion group for people to join, and it'll be hopefully, practically focused on what we can do together and organisational stuff, as well as maybe occasionally debating out some thorny issues. But we want it to be a very much a practically focused thing. We've also discussed the idea of day school, which I think is a great idea, and that may go hand in hand with a series of sort of one-off public meetings, which I think again would be a good idea. Just to throw it out there, for a day school, I think something that would work really well might be, for example, to have, a morning, couple of sessions in the morning, maybe women and climate, with all women speakers. I'm really heartened by this meeting that lots of women made really fantastic contributions that you don't get in a lot of the old stale left meetings. So let's build on that by all means. And also, we have a lot of collective knowledge of and engagement with trade union issues around climate. So, the afternoon session on just transition, on trade unions, it would be fantastic if the comrades from Korea could speak about their struggles at that, something like that. Just throwing those out, but that might be something we could later kind of discuss. Beyond that, in terms of ongoing discussions, and maybe through discussion list, we do need to consider, putting out short, punchy sort of like position statements and or press releases, as and when they're necessary. Not necessarily long manifesto length sort of statements, but basic kind of things that tie in with things where we can agree. Again, this is a question of where we can agree on stuff. Let's get that out there, and where we have to agree to disagree, fine, but we carry on talking and carry on working together. I just want to leave it there, but the two proposals really are that we set up a discussion group, and then we maybe use that to put together day school public meetings. So I can see in the comment in the chat that Alan's put about the RSP proposal on stateless nations. What I would say is I'm 100% in favour that these amendments sort of things go into future statements when we issue them. Absolutely. What we need to do, so I'm digressing a bit here, is the whole thing is about broadening the base of this movement. So we have more input from different countries, different nations, from different groups, so that next time we put out a statement, we can agonize over it for a week, and then at the last minute somebody will say, well, we missed this. Yes, we hold our hands up. We missed that because that we didn't have particular people who were thinking along those things. The broader we are, the better we are able to do that. So yes, I support the proposal that Alan's put together, and I say anything that we've put out is never the finished article. It's always a work in progress. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Rob. And as if by magic, that has brought us down to 8:29, and in just a few seconds the clock will tick over to 8:30, which is our scheduled finish time. So look at that, how slick are we? So I hesitate to say any other business, because if I do that, there'll probably be 10 hands, and then we'll still be here at 9:15. So if there is anything really urgent, what we would ask comrades to do, if you like to be kept in touch, please pop your email address in the chat. Obviously, there's no compulsion to do that, and if you're uneasy about sharing your email address, we understand that entirely. But if you would like to be contacted, you could put your email address in the chat. But otherwise, as you do that, as you type your email address, clearly we've heard a great deal there, as Rob had said, recognising that we are about building a mass movement. So lots of good ideas about education, about events, about day schools, about public meetings, about propaganda, and this idea of serving as a pole of attraction that draws the energy across a very wide constituency, political constituency, which has widened significantly in recent years and will continue to widen. And look out also for the publication of those various tranches of the 6th assessment reports from the intergovernmental panel on climate change. I think it's probably best if we leave it there. Look out for information about the next meeting or our next event. It remains for me to say thank you very much indeed for participating this evening, and I look forward to seeing you all at some other future meeting. Thank you all very much indeed. Good night.